Okay, so we're live. Welcome to live stream number 8, I believe. Today is going to be a little bit more informal than previous weeks. I am joined today by Dayton Young, who is our product designer here at Fight for the Future. And our topic of the day is, well, it's kind of a split topic. We're going to be talking about cryptocurrency and the intricacies of securities and some situations going on with like the legality of different cryptocurrencies. And we're also going to touch on a little bit later in the episode this topic that I am very fascinated with called killer robots, which, if you think Terminator, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But we can get more into that later. As always, if you like this content and you want to see more of it, please make sure that you subscribe here on YouTube. Click the bell for notifications. And we're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you prefer the audio version, or if you have whatever reason to be wanting to hear the audio version instead of watching it live here on YouTube, you can go ahead and follow us there on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just yesterday, we had a really cool expert panel on Section 230. So I will make sure to leave a link to that live stream in the description here. So you should definitely check it out. That's also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But might as well get right into it with the cryptocurrency discussion. So first of all, thanks for making the time to join me here today, Dayton. I really appreciate it. Can you let us know a little bit about what is going on with securities and cryptocurrency and what you wanted to discuss here today?
Yeah, as always, thank you for having me on. It's fun just to hang out and chat about killer robots and cryptocurrencies and all the crazy stuff happening in the world with you. So I think one of the big things that's happening in the world of cryptocurrencies that a lot of people aren't talking about, I've seen a little bit of coverage on it, but it's kind of getting lost in some of the other large news stories that are happening in the world. But Warren Davidson, an Ohio Republican, has introduced the Token Taxonomy Act to the floor of Congress. Now, this proposed legislation clarifies that digital tokens, which behave in specific ways, should be treated as currencies and not securities by government regulators. In my opinion, this is very simple, common sense legislation. It has bipartisan support, which I don't know if you've paid attention to politics the last few years, Joe, but bipartisan support is very difficult to accomplish. So I think Darren Soto, who's a Democrat, and Eric Swalwell, who is a very outspoken Democrat and critic of President Trump and a lot of conservatives, he's a co-sponsor of the bill. Warren Davis is, I think, very conservative in a lot of his policies. So this is something that people with very, very different core political philosophies have come together and agreed on and said, hey, this makes sense. Let's give cryptocurrencies some clarification so that people who want to invest in cryptocurrencies, people who are working and developing cryptocurrencies, understand what to expect from the government. Unfortunately, this is not the first time that Davidson has introduced the Token Taxonomy Act to Congress. It's not the second time he's introduced it to Congress.
Mm-hmm.
It is the third time. So maybe the third time will be a charm. It hasn't been able to gain any steam or support beyond kind of the main co-sponsors previously.
What's been going on with the last two attempts? Do you
That's
know why it didn't work out?
I think it really is just the larger political climate. There are other issues that lawmakers seem to think are more important, such as not providing us support for pandemic relief and cutting taxes and all sorts of other very urgent things that certain lawmakers think should have a priority over stuff like cryptocurrency regulation. I think right now Davidson is facing an uphill battle because there's HR1. There's infrastructure spending that's big that needs to be tackled. There's all sorts of large issues regarding the pandemic, and Congress has their hands full, and a lot of folks just still aren't taking cryptocurrencies seriously. They think this is kind of a plaything for tech bros and Wall Street bigwigs, and that they don't see cryptocurrencies as something that's going to be transformative technology that helps ordinary folks like you and me gain financial independence. So it just doesn't have the urgency for lawmakers.
Well, it seems like there are two spectrums of that, right? There are people that don't take it very seriously and don't think something like the Token Taxonomy Act is important. And then there are people on the other side that are saying, cryptocurrency is going to collapse the financial system. Cryptocurrency are securities, which is something that I really want to get into with you. And there's a lot of resistance as well as apathy, it seems, on the legislative front when it comes to cryptocurrency.
Yeah,
Can
I
you
think
explain a little bit about the resistance and the situation with, classifying cryptocurrencies as securities or whatever the alternative would be?
yeah, of course. I think you're right that there are a lot of people that ignore it, and then there are a few people who attack it. And the people who attack it tend to be, some unelected bureaucrats. There are some legislators as well who see cryptocurrencies as kind of a tool of big tech to undermine traditional financial institutions and to exploit vulnerable people. And I think that's a legitimate concern. You see stuff like, oh geez, it was called Libra. Do you remember what Facebook is
I don't know
called?
what it's called now.
And it's not, and Facebook, of course, it isn't Facebook's cryptocurrency. They're just the one who's championing it, leading the coalition, leading development, investing in it, but it's not theirs. So there are big tech companies who are trying to release their own cryptocurrencies. There are companies like JP Morgan Chase that are testing out their own digital coin, and I think people are right to be wary that there are some predatory actors in this environment who are using this technology as a way to circumvent regulations that were put in place to help protect consumers. That being said, there's also a lot of traditional financial institutions and government institutions that result in the exploitation of consumers. I mean, I think the last time I was on here, I spoke at length about the cryptocurrency regulation that's coming, the way that the US Treasury has extensive files on companies like Deutsche Bank and HSBC and JP Morgan Chase for all of the crimes they're committing in money laundering. And our government isn't doing anything about that. So it's very strange that certain people are attacking cryptocurrencies for their legitimate threats to individuals, while also ignoring the harm being done by our current system. So it's always important to say, well, why are we looking at this but not at this? Let's try to treat everybody the same way with the same level of scrutiny.
Hmm.
So that brings us back to the Token Taxonomy Act and why that hopefully kind of helps create some clarity for regulators and forces our government to treat cryptocurrencies in a consistent manner. Because right now there's not a lot of clarity around that. So securities, the easiest way to understand what security is to think about a company's stock. GameStop has, been the big stock that's in the news lately, but I think you personally may have invested in a few stocks here and there over the years. And the way stocks work is that companies issue stock to raise money to invest in their business. So you and I can buy that stock as a way of investing in the company. We use our money to purchase the stock, and that stock gives us a claim of ownership in the company, right? When the company invests the money we've given them wisely, and the value of the company goes up, the value of our stock goes up. We can hold on to that stock, expecting it to continue to go up because we think the company's doing good stuff with our money, or we can sell that stock to someone else and take our money and go buy like a Lamborghini. Now, I drive a 15-year-old Honda Civic, so you can guess how my investments have been going lately. But that's the basic thing, right? The stock is something; it's a contract between you and the company. You get some ownership in their profits and what they're doing, and then you can determine how you want to use that going forward. So stocks are securities. They're not the only type of securities, but that's kind of the easiest way to think about securities. Lawyers and accountants are always trying to figure out the best ways to help their clients invest and save money without, of course, running afoul of the government. So the government came up with a pretty easy way to identify whether something is a security, and it's called the Howie Test. The Howie Test was developed following a 1946 court case, like the government versus Howie. It was it's a 60, 70-year-old court case over real estate. But this is what we use today to still determine whether financial instruments are securities or not. And basically it says securities check off these three criteria. One, are you investing money? Two, are you investing money in this common enterprise? And that just means, does this thing you're investing in act like a business? Does it have employees and profits and all that stuff? And then number three, do you expect to get profits from the efforts of the employees and all the stuff that's happening in this, common enterprise? And if something checks all those boxes, it's a security, right? Like if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a security. So the SEC has publicly stated in the past that Bitcoin and Ethereum are currencies and they're not securities.
That's something I was going to ask you, is, are currencies securities? Because the way I look at it, cryptocurrencies are in fact currencies.
That's true, but not all cryptocurrencies are made the same, right? Yeah. So Bitcoin was developed and launched into the world by Satoshi Nakamoto, who may or may not be a real person. That may be a pseudonym. We don't know. And it's completely decentralized, right? There's no Bitcoin incorporated. There's no Ethereum incorporated. Like how do you, these are completely decentralized currencies. So when you say, are you investing money? Are you and I investing money in cryptocurrency? Yeah, I take a little bit of my money from my paycheck every now and then and buy some cryptocurrency. So check one, are you investing money in Bitcoin? Yes. Is it a common enterprise? Well, that's kind of where Bitcoin and Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies don't pass the Howie test, and what makes them not securities and currencies instead is because it doesn't act like a business. Bitcoin doesn't act like a business. There's no Bitcoin incorporated. Who's the CEO of Bitcoin? Nobody. So it right there, it's not. But with other cryptocurrencies, and what we'll talk about in a second, that's not always the case. So the SEC has actually won some court cases against Kin, which was the cryptocurrency launched by social media company Kik, and Telegram for acting as unregulated and unregistered securities. And these court cases weren't always like completely cut and dry. There's nuances to them, but ultimately what the SEC won and prevailed in these cases because they said, for example, like with Kik, what the SEC successfully argued in court was that, hey, this is run by a company. You launched this cryptocurrency. You took the money from the sale of this cryptocurrency, and people who were buying this cryptocurrency, it was tied to the success of your company. So they were expecting that they would get a return, that this cryptocurrency value would grow as your company did better. And that's kind of where the line gets drawn in these court cases. And right now, again, that's why the Token Taxonomy Act is kind of important, because as cryptocurrency investors, yes, we should do our due diligence before investing in cryptocurrencies, but how are you and I supposed to know how a federal judge is going to rule in a court case brought by the SEC against, Chainlink or Binance Coin or Cardano? Some of these are decentralized, and some of these cryptocurrencies are launched by organizations, by nonprofits, by individuals, and you say, well, I can make a guess, but I really don't know. I don't have any insight. And it might be 5-10 years before the government launches a case against them. And in that time, if I buy $500 or $5,000 worth of this, the government can just pick and choose winners. And all of a sudden I'm out because I didn't correctly guess how a federal judge is going to rule on this 10 years from now. That's really not helpful. So I think when we look at the Token Taxonomy Act, why it's so important is because it's just a lawmaker saying, hey, let's clarify in writing what is required for a digital token to be a cryptocurrency and not a security. And then there's nothing to argue about.
So under the Token Taxonomy Act, how would a company like Chainlink, who has, a central organization and business plans, or Basic Attention Token, who has an organization and a business plan, how would they be classified under the Token Taxonomy Act?
Yeah, so I encourage you and everybody else to read the Token Taxonomy Act. It is up online as all our laws are, and it goes into those details. Broadly, it says that if you're creating this token, if it has a transaction history that's recorded in a distributed digital ledger, if it resists modification or tampering by any single person or group of persons, like an entity, if it can be transferred between people without a custodian, all sorts of these things on the checklist, it says this qualifies as a currency and not a security. So it just creates this least common denominator that says what will kind of like uses the Howie Act type of framework to say, is it controlled by a single person? Is it acting like a business? Or is it doing this other stuff? And hey, that's the law now.
So what's on the horizon for this bill? Like time, what is the timeline? Things like that. Not sure.
I really have no insight into that. And I would like to think that it's something that gets people's attention and that
Hmm.
lawmakers think is worthy of talking about and discussing and at least getting a vote on, because this is something that's going to impact our finances more and more and more as time goes by. It's something that regulators are, already taking very seriously, even if lawmakers aren't. We talked about Feinstein's proposal for cryptocurrency surveillance. So Janet Yellen, the head of the Treasury, is saying that Bitcoin is mainly used for illicit financing, and
Hmm.
she's going to go after this. So it's something the Treasury cares a lot about. And again, the SEC has filed this court case against Ripple Labs, arguing that XRP is a security and not a currency, and that's impacted everybody who holds Ripple. Which at the time the lawsuit was announced, I think that Ripple was the third largest cryptocurrency behind only Bitcoin and Ethereum in terms of market cap.
I think that
So
might be right. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, this is billions of dollars worth of investments from investors, from people. These are huge issues, and right now it's just all in the hands of the courts and bureaucratic agencies. And so I think certainly lawmakers need to be caring about it, because it's something that impacts their constituents more and more.
So in our own private discussions, we've talked about Ripple a little bit, and in your opinion, if I remember correctly, you were saying if there was something in place like the Token Taxonomy Act, then what's going on with Ripple probably wouldn't be happening. Can you expand on that a little bit, or correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. If we did have laws in place that clearly said what is and isn't a security, then it would be, I think, impossible for the SEC to make some of the arguments they're making against Ripple. And it gets pretty complicated. Feel free to interrupt me, but I think I'm about to go on
Mhm.
a rant. And if you don't know what's going on with Ripple, I think it's very interesting. And even though it gets a little bit technical, it's worth understanding how these different arms of our government are moving and why this is creating such a crazy situation for all sorts of different people. So Ripple Labs is an entity, and they created XRP, which is the cryptocurrency, which sometimes gets called Ripple as well, and that creates some confusion. So I'm going to do my best to call the company Ripple Labs and the token XRP, but I may mess that up a little bit. So let me know if that causes confusion. But XRP was released in 2012, I think, and like pretty much all cryptocurrencies, its price has been erratic through the years. It jumped up to, I think, $2.30 in 2018, briefly making it the second largest cryptocurrency, taking over ETH. But mostly it's been hovering around 40 cents. It's been in the top five. I think right now it's number seven, because people have been really interested in Cardano and Polkadot over the past few months. But it's a big cryptocurrency, not as big as Bitcoin, but it's kind of like the Wendy's of cryptocurrency, right? It's got a great spicy chicken sandwich. A lot of people like it, but it's not number one.
I like that analogy.
When I thought of it, I'm like, so does that make Ethereum Taco Bell? And I'm like, who's somebody? You can go pretty deep down that rabbit hole. So who's the in and out of cryptocurrency world? And
It's a
now
good
I'm getting
question.
hungry. So XRP isn't without controversy. I think some people accused, it has this big online Twitter army and Twitter following of people who comment and like and upvote things. And some researchers have claimed that they have proof showing that the army is pretty much a bot army that's used to manipulate social media.
Who's
So
making these claims? That's
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah, it's worth checking out. One researcher did, his Twitter analysis and said, hey, like it looks like all of these, Twitter accounts supporting hashtag XRP army are bots.
Wow.
And initially the Ripple folks said, hey, if this is true, we'll take it seriously and we'll take action. And then the researcher came out with his research, and then he's claiming, well, now they're not talking back to me anymore, and they're not taking action on this, and look at how bad this is. So there's some controversy over how Ripple Labs and the fandom of XRP is being executed, and whether it's manufactured or real. Again, I think you look at the market cap, that is certainly real. There are a lot of people who definitely care about this. And when the SEC announced their lawsuit against XRP, and XRP was delisted from major coin, trading platforms, there was very real outrage at people, losing very real money in their investments in this. So that can't be argued. But there's some controversies around this, and I think that's worth noting. Additionally, FinCEN. It's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and they're Department of the U.S. Treasury. We've talked about them a few times before. In 2015, FinCEN levied a $700,000 fine against Ripple Labs. They said that basically Ripple wasn't doing enough to protect XRP customers from money laundering and terrorist financing, and that Ripple was going around existing laws that kind of protect currency users from being exploited. And so Ripple basically asked FinCEN, okay, so you're saying that XRP is officially a currency and we need to act like a currency and register with FinCEN as a currency and do all this stuff to be in compliance with currency regulations. And FinCEN was like, yes, XRP is a currency and not a security, and that's the way we're going to regulate you. So get your stuff in order and follow financial currency regulations. So,
can I interrupt you just for a moment? What were the accusations about not following like money laundering and terrorist financing laws? Because as far as I can tell, they're just being traded on cryptocurrency exchanges like every other cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and so I would have to dive into the actual court case to understand a little bit more. That's a really great question. I don't have the big details, but it was all about reporting requirements. And I'm not sure why that would fall on Ripple Labs as opposed to the actual trading platforms.
Right. I can't imagine the way that they're being traded is going to be drastically different from any other cryptocurrency.
Yeah, because XRP, the way it's being traded is decentralized, right? It's on other platforms.
Right.
But perhaps because Ripple Labs, and I'm speculating here because I should go into that ruling and understand it a little bit more. But it gets pretty technical and pretty finance heavy. Is that, perhaps because it came from Ripple Labs, it was developed by Ripple Labs, that there's some sort of authority they have over it, even though it's decentralized. So anyway, Ripple Labs said, cool, we are officially a currency according to the US government. We're going to pay this fine. We're going to be in compliance with regulations, and we're going to do whatever the government wants us to because this is a currency, and that's how it should be treated. That was in 2015. So they've been operating for the past, 6 years under the assumption that they're a currency. Ripple Labs had a lot of clients. I think they targeted the banking world, who initially wanted to use XRP to facilitate money transfers. I believe that these banks don't actually use XRP due to concerns over the public nature of the blockchain, price volatility of XRP, transaction fees, things like that. But that these banks still worked with Ripple Labs on technology solutions.
Is this the goal of the XRP currency, is to be used by banks to transfer money from one place to another? Just for the folks listening.
Yes, and though this is where the SEC's case against Ripple gets kind of complicated, because the SEC in their filings argues that Ripple Labs sold XRP to raise money to then go out and find a business use for XRP, and that they didn't, target this, banking sector initially, and they're just kind of, looking for proof that we swear this is a currency and not a security, and we didn't use this to raise money, but we're going to take the money we made from the launch of the currency, and now we got to figure out a way to make this a legit currency. And Ripple Labs, I believe, is kind of arguing, hey, we're a company, we're using this currency that we developed that other people are using as a currency, and there are many possible uses for it because it's in its infancy, and we as an organization have every right to be able to go to different businesses in different sectors and say, like, hey, how do you think you could use this great technology? We'd love to work with you to develop solutions for it. And that's part of blockchain technology in general, right? It's that, hey, we have this great technology, hey, we have, Ethereum, we can develop products based on the Ethereum blockchain. What great, amazing things can we do? And, the SEC is saying, well, you are the company that developed it and you're too closely tied with it and your fortunes are tied to the success of this cryptocurrency and vice versa. So that's violating securities rules. So it does get very complicated, but generally, yes, one of the purposes is that, hey, this could be used to facilitate international money transfers for banks with lower transaction fees than banks typically use and with greater transparency and fees. So these banks still work with Ripple Labs on technology solutions. These sorts of activities, seeing the success of Ripple Labs certainly didn't hurt investors who were speculating on XRP's value. But in 2020, the SEC dropped this lawsuit on Ripple Labs saying that you've been selling XRP as an unregistered security since 2013. So now they're saying it's been going on for 7-8 years since you launched. And again, there's been 7 years worth of time for them to gather evidence and bring these charges against them. And a different US government, department within the Treasury has said that you are not a security, you are a cryptocurrency. So that's pretty strange that they're doing it now. So you might want to ask, right, like, how can the SEC come back all this time later and say XRP is a security and not a currency? We talked a little bit about that, which is that, there is a central kind of organization behind XRP. It's also important to note that, right, Bitcoin, how many Bitcoin are there in the world right now? People are mining Bitcoin, right? So
something like 18 million, I think.
Yeah, and there's going to be more because it's constantly being mined. And so it's again decentralized because everybody wants to try to mine it and they're competing for the ability to mine it. Whereas Ripple, it's not being mined right now. Ripple Labs created a bunch of XRP and released it out to the public and said, it's cryptocurrency, here you go. And that's very different fundamentally from Bitcoin. So that's part of what the SEC is saying is like, hey, that sounds like an initial coin offering, which is similar to initial public offering, right? You're releasing this thing that you're not saying it's stock, but you're saying it's a cryptocurrency, but you're releasing a ton of it. And then once people are buying it, you're making money off of that. Okay, right? So people are investing in it.
There's a very cynical part of me that likes, in a way, that the pre-mined cryptocurrencies are getting a little bit of pressure, because I do think that it is very opposite to the philosophy of crypto. Decentralized mining of these currencies is, I think, one of the things that makes them special. And pre-mine ICO things have always bugged me. But at the same time,
No, go ahead. At the same time, what?
At the same time, I'm not so sure that cryptocurrencies, or even XRP for that matter, are securities. But the pre-mine thing has always bugged me.
These are really important things, though, right? Like, we're getting in the details now, but this is where the fun conversation is, because that's such a super important difference between something like Bitcoin and XRP, which is that people are mining Bitcoin. It is completely decentralized. There's no argument about whether it's decentralized or whether there's a company running it, because there just isn't. So it's much safer from that. And that's probably one of the reasons why it has such a big market cap and so many people have invested in it, because everybody understands very easily this is something that's different. Whereas once you have initial coin offerings and pre-mined stuff, it's like, well, that's leading to a different type of exploitation that we really probably should be concerned about. And it's good that the SEC is scrutinizing these companies.
And also, a mineable cryptocurrency approaches something resembling, more fairness, where, there's still going to be a radically asymmetrical distribution of cryptocurrencies, even if they can be mined. But under a pre-mine, the amount of whales within that currency and people that were part of the original minting of it, the ratio of like absolute like titans, like holding 60, 70, 80, 90% of a currency, are going to be much higher than something that is publicly mineable.
Yeah, and I think that's better. That's really important. That's part of the SEC's case, and that's part of Ripple's defense too, is they're saying, yes, the founders of Ripple Labs, own a bunch of XRP. We made a lot of money off of this. That's definitely true. But we put, I think, I think they put 90% of their holdings of XRP into an account over which they have no control. So that was one of their ways of trying to insulate themselves from what they thought might inevitably come as accusations that this is a security. I'm sure they spoke to a lot of lawyers. I'm sure they spoke to a lot of accountants, and they did speak to government agents saying like, hey, we've been under attack by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. This is really important to us. We need to make sure we're insulated from, people perceiving us this way, because we want to be taken seriously as a company, and we want XRP to be taken seriously, cryptocurrency separate from us. So they have taken some steps to mitigate those sorts of issues, but those are still issues, and they're philosophical, they're moral, they're financial issues that we need to get to the bottom of.
Well, with centralized control of a currency like that, when you have a handful of people with a huge amount of the currency, it's very easy to manipulate the price. Like, very easy. It's easy to crash it. You can do a lot of things when you have a small number of people that control, something like 75% of a currency. You can totally sway the market however you want for the most part.
And I think, at least for me personally, that's one reason I wouldn't invest or speculate on currencies that are more centralized. Again, you have to do due diligence to understand all the different cryptocurrencies, and it's hard because sometimes you just want to say, oh, I'll throw $100 over here if you have $100 to throw somewhere, which we don't always. But to say, okay, that seems fun, or a friend told me about Cardano, so maybe I'll just buy that and see if it goes up this week. And if you're not doing your due diligence, you could be contributing to these things. So it's really important to understand who's behind these companies, and beyond just their marketing videos about how this is disruptive and innovative and can change the world. Don't
Absolutely.
take their word. But it's hard to know too, because people with bad intentions are very good at hiding those intentions behind layers of shell companies and nonprofits and legalese and technical stuff that sometimes at a certain point we have to take somebody's word for it. We have to listen to lawyers and tech experts and other people within these industries to say, well, everybody else seems to think Cardano's great, so maybe I should take that seriously as well. There's definitely social proof, and that can be manipulated. I also think it's interesting, right, that with the initial coin offerings and the pre-mined currencies, I mean, with Bitcoin, what we've seen is that as more computing power is required to mine Bitcoin as time goes by, that's resulted in small miners being pushed out of the marketplace for mining, and that it really is controlled only by people with the assets to run and operate huge mining operations. So that's democratic, right? That leads to some of the same wealth inequality issues that we see in fiat currencies. And that's a real problem with Bitcoin. If you look at Bitcoin ownership, you can see that while there certainly are a lot of people in developing countries using Bitcoin for transactional purposes and to achieve some measure of financial independence, the overwhelming majority of Bitcoin is held by people, by a small number of people who have a large amount of wealth. So, in some ways, I agree with you. The pre-mined crypto is problematic, but at the same time, if it's pre-mined and you release it to the market, everybody has a fair chance to get it at a low price, unlike something like Bitcoin, where you have to kind of guess, and if you're lucky about the next Bitcoin, then you're a millionaire, and if not, then it's just the same thing we see with fiat currencies.
Yeah, and on top of that, with mining becoming more and more centralized, it actually begins approaching a situation that, in my opinion, could crash the entire crypto market. Are you familiar with the idea of a 51% attack?
No, tell me more.
So the whole idea behind the mining and validation of transactions, the mining of the currency and the validation of the transactions, is that it's going to be carried out on a distributed network of, decentralized mining computers. I think Nakamoto had originally envisioned people doing all the mining on, basic laptops, maybe not smartphones, because it was only 2008 or maybe 9. But the idea was that it was going to be done on fairly basic hardware to democratize it, and that the mining would be distributed across many, 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 many users. And in a sense, I guess it kind of is. But as you mentioned, it's getting harder and harder to, obtain the hardware needed to do cryptocurrency mining. So the overall number of cryptocurrency miners, it's hard to get the hardware at all, never mind afford it. But so the number of cryptocurrency miners is decreasing over time as the barrier to entry gets higher and higher. And what happens is when you have a group that is either cooperating together or is so big that they can control 51% or more of the mining and validation of transactions, that is the threshold after which somebody could start validating whatever transactions they want, and the dreaded double spend becomes technologically possible. And if there is ever even one double spend on Bitcoin, if a group of people work together to gain 51% of the mining operations of crypto, of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, faith could be lost in the cryptocurrency and the price could crash to unbelievably low levels. So the decentralization of crypto, the decentralization of Bitcoin, is actually really important to the overall health of the currency in general. So it is extremely unfortunate that it's becoming harder and harder to enter the mining space. It's something I'm very fascinated with.
Wasn't there a double spend with Filecoin the past week?
It's possible. If the mining operations, if there was one group of people or one miner that was able to get 51%, they could double spend.
Yeah, I saw some headlines on that. I haven't had time to dive into it, but there was some sort of double spend issue with Filecoin. So really interesting stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about how decentralized networks can be co-opted by, a group of individuals. And the issues that we're seeing here are issues that we've seen in different industries, right? Is there a natural consolidation because of the way Bitcoin is organized? Can different cryptocurrencies resolve this issue? If so, how? We are still in the super early stages of cryptocurrencies, right? It's such a brand new technology, and we're going to hit more problems as time goes by. We're going to develop new complex problems, and people are, as long as these things are perceived to have value, and I think they're perceived to have value because people are expending resources to mine them, thus proving the value of them. The value is recorded on the blockchain. Whenever you and I spend money, that's proof that blockchain technologies have value. It's recording something saying that Dayton Young says this has value because he just spent real, fiat currency on it. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the value of this project goes up just a little bit. People are spending a lot of money and energy and resources to mine the next block of Bitcoin. That's recorded and proof that lots of people think that this is worth spending, millions of dollars on mining devices to set up. So this must be worth that much money. So, how are these things going to change as time goes by? I don't know. I'd like more regulatory clarity, which is, again, one of the reasons why I think the Token Taxonomy Act is so important. And I think that, the Ripple case is going to provide us with a lot of clarity one way or the other. And to kind of bring it back to that and kind of hopefully tie a little bow on it, though, if we have more interesting tangents on it, I'm welcome to talk about that as well. But, recently the court case is developing and things that happened, two big events happened recently that I think people who are interested in this space should be aware of. And one is that Ripple asked a federal judge to compel the SEC to release all of the documents related to its determination that Bitcoin and Ethereum are currencies and not securities, right? That makes sense. The SEC has said, hey, these two we've determined are not securities. Ripple wants that information to say, hey, look at us, look at them. We're very similar in these ways, right? So why are they treating us differently? Mm-hmm. The SEC has said, we are not going to release that information. They've said, this has nothing to do, Bitcoin has nothing to do with XRP. Ethereum has nothing to do with XRP, which I'm not a legal expert, but that seems very strange because the whole core of the issue is how the SEC determines what's a currency and what's a security, what's their framework. You and I can talk about the Howie Test and on a high level understand that, but there are high powered lawyers understanding the very details of this and arguing nuances that we can't hope to understand. And so it's really important to say, well, what's the deal with all of this stuff? And if the SEC isn't being transparent about what they're doing, if they are arguing that we're allowed to think about Bitcoin and Ethereum in a different way than we're allowed to think about XRP, then really it's unelected bureaucrats within the government picking winners and losers within this industry. And that doesn't sound like fair regulation that protects consumers like me. That actually sounds like insiders who have all the power and centralized authority to determine issues that impact my financial freedom. And that's no good. So I think that hopefully the judge will rule that those documents have to be released, but that's going to be very big because that's going to give the public, if they're released, it's not only going to give XRP's lawyers, Ripple's lawyers, insight into how things are happening at the SEC. It's going to give the public insight into how these decisions are being made, and that transparency can be really important, so that every cryptocurrency can say, okay, well, we're going to make conscious efforts, to release new cryptocurrencies and things in compliance with, precedent or not, and leave ourselves vulnerable. And that gives us more information to make decisions on what to invest in and what to speculate on. The second big thing is that during the hearing, the federal judge asked the SEC lawyers if people like you and me, Joe, who have bought and sold XRP can be held liable for selling these unregistered securities, right? Because if we can hold Ripple accountable for selling unregistered securities, then what happens if I sell my XRP? I'm guilty of the same thing, right? And the SEC's lawyer said, no, only the people at Ripple Labs can be held liable. Now, we talked about it a little bit earlier. When the SEC brought this court case against Ripple, lots of trading platforms, delisted XRP because they were worried about being sued by the SEC for participating in this scheme. Well, now people are saying, well, hey, the SEC's lawyers have said that you can't be held liable, so open trading back up. And can you imagine if trading is opened back up for XRP, and XRP is, trading at levels that are just kind of not at all concerned with the case against Ripple Labs? Well, that also kind of proves Ripple Labs' point that, the success or failure of XRP is completely independent from, what happens to Ripple Labs, because the SEC could sue Ripple Labs out of existence. But if, you're still trading XRP, I don't care, because XRP isn't tied to Ripple Labs. Those guys at Ripple Labs, they have to find new jobs, but hey, XRP is still trading. It's not the same. So that actually undermines SEC's ability to put Ripple Labs out of business because, hey, look at these two things. They're not coordinated with each other, and therefore it can't be a security. It's its own independent cryptocurrency. So it's not a nail in the coffin to the case, but it would certainly be very powerful if companies started, relisting XRP and allowing folks to trade.
Well, thank you for that. And, as this develops over time, we will be providing updates. So keep an eye on this, live stream. Keep an eye on the YouTube channel in general, and our social media for, updates on the Token Taxonomy Act. And moving on. So this is a topic that comes off as silly, but it's actually quite serious. It's not, I would say, not something to be realistically worried about in like the very immediate future, but it is something that I certainly have my eye on, and I think others should, because by the time it's a problem, I am pretty convinced it will be too late to reverse course, and that is the topic of killer robots. Let me just do a quick screen share, and for the folks listening to the podcast, I apologize, but I will do my best to describe what we're like showing on screen here. And Dayton, just let me know if this looks good to you, because I don't really have as much of a frame of reference here, but. So, how does that look, Dayton?
It looks creepy, but the picture quality is good, but the robot looks scary. So I'm interested to see what happens next.
How about when I full screen? How does this look?
Yeah, it's clear.
Cool. Okay. So this is, I don't know the names of the humanoid robots, but this is a robot by a company called Boston Dynamics. And I'm disabling the sound because, copyright and all that. There's music in it. But anyway, this is a funny social media video that was posted recently where they have trained these humanoid robots to do fun dances. And yeah, it's really impressive. I actually had to watch it a bunch of times, look at the reflections in the glass, look at the shadows underneath the legs there, and see where the windows are and where the lighting is, because I honestly thought for sure that this was just CG. I didn't think that we were this far in robotics to create something that is as mobile as this. And I think, like a lot of other people, maybe, the first thing that crossed my mind is, holy shit, what happens when, we put weapons on these, or they start misunderstanding, what is in front of them or something like that. Because as we have seen in the last few years, and really in the last decade, when we, allow... Actually, so to back up a little bit, there's a very, very interesting episode of the Lex Friedman podcast with a professor named Max Tegmark on there, who goes into very deep detail on this topic. But he is like an AI researcher at MIT, and he is extremely concerned with the progress and just sort of like fast and loose nature of the development of these types of robots. The yellow robot that you can see on screen is called Spot, and it's sort of a general use helper robot. You can see that it has that like crane arm on its like body that it can use to manipulate objects. It would be a really great place to mount a gun. And it has been recently licensed to the Boston Police Department and the NYPD. They are saying that they're going to use it for things like patrolling and crowd control. But as this blog post describes, which I guess Starry Night Cat, this is something that was shared on our work chat by our colleague Leah. So thank you for this, Leah. But this blog post goes into detail about language that is used by the police when describing non-lethal types of weapons, and then goes on to explain what. So we're talking beanbag rounds, rubber bullets, things like that. So it's this section here that I think is very interesting. So labels like non-lethal and less lethal guns, which fire foam rounds, beanbag rounds, and rubber bullets, have taken out eyes and cracked open skulls and are deliberately named to make them sound more harmless than they are. I didn't know this. Foam bullets are solid metal and foam tipped. Beanbag rounds are sacks of cloth filled with lead pellets, and rubber bullets are metal bullets that have rubber coating. So when they are saying that they are going to use these for things like crowd control or patrolling, they literally cannot be trusted with the type of language that they are using. And in a very science fiction description, there is, and I will link to this blog post and all the articles that I'm showing in the descriptions of anywhere that this is showing up. But they describe how to disable the robot if it is attacking someone or, not working correctly. Underneath the body of this Spot robot, there is a handle that you can pull forward, and it takes out the battery and disables it. It also highlights near the joints of the legs and stuff to keep your fingers out because it will crush them. And it also details that the sensors, the way that the spot robot moves around, is fully optical. So if you can blind it, then it is essentially disabled. It can't make any decisions. The reason that all of this is so freaky is that we've seen repeatedly.
Horrifying. Like,
we've seen
what problem does this solve? Wow.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's the problem that it solves. And this is something that Max Tegmark covers on the Lex Friedman podcast. When we are using a drone overseas, you'll have a drone operator in the United States, and they will be wirelessly controlling the drone. They still control drones by human operators. There's compression through the wireless transmission of the video, and there's also the delay of the human operator. When they see a target and they then fire, it's not instantaneous, and it's up to the human mind to determine these things. And then there's also the latency of transmission. So when they press fire on their computer in America, it has to travel at the speed of light, bounce off a few servers, I would imagine, or satellites, and then enter the drone and then execute the command. And that can take seconds. It could take maybe even a minute. I don't know the exact latency. So they have this horrific idea of, what if we just put AI in the drone and it knew what targets looked like, and it knew what it was allowed to attack, and there was no latency, and we don't need a human operator. Maybe they can have a human fallback. But the problem is, something that we've discovered with these neural networks, these black boxes, these machine learning systems, is that they often can do the most efficient thing that you told them to do really well, but it's always not the most ethical thing. It's oftentimes not even the most correct thing to do. It's something that we've seen displayed in social media algorithms, where you tell the AI, give me the most impressions and the most clicks. And unfortunately, the conclusion is, to get the most impressions and clicks, the AI figured out, piss people off, freak them out, make them scared, make them angry, which is what happened. And now we're seeing social media companies like Twitter and Facebook and stuff, generally speaking, making billions of dollars, getting billions of clicks, and making everybody super miserable. It wasn't the intended result, but that's what the neural net figured out makes the most money. And now they're backtracking and trying to figure it out. And there could be similar errors in the neural networks that govern these machines. And if we ever allow them to start targeting people, even non-lethally, as we covered, non-lethal is still extremely brutal. We are going to be in a lot of trouble. Some of the proposed solutions to this are, getting an international treaty together, where every country agrees, let's not even design this stuff. And there's obviously lots of skepticism that, well, what if one person does? And Tegmark's argument is that we were able to, I'm going to go back to normal screen, that we were able to outlaw biological weapons, even though they're easy to develop. We haven't really had a very significant bioweapon attack, even though they're cheaper than nukes and they can kill just as many people. If we can organize some sort of international treaty that no UN nations are allowed to design, these autonomous weapons, that we might be safe. But it's something that I think about all the time. It really freaks me out. It's not going to exactly be Terminator, but I mean, imagine if one of these live ammunition starts targeting everything around it rather than what you told it to. Never mind the fact that it's horrifying that it would target any living thing. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Dayton?
So many. So I mean, I hadn't seen that video before. I remember seeing Boston Dynamics videos back in the day. I don't even know how long. It doesn't feel like it was long ago. Maybe it was 5 or 10 years ago. But I remember seeing this sort of robot with a big backpack hooked up to wires and just walking and kind of like falling down. But when it's hooked onto a system that provides with energy and it can do rudimentary tasks, the things these robots were doing. I mean, it wasn't just the fact that they were dancing, it was the fluidity of the motions required for dancing, right? The nuances of
Mm-hmm.
being able to move the hips in like 360-degree ways. Whereas the early videos of this kind of stuff I saw, it was, the hips were moving one
Yeah.
direction. You couldn't even get a swivel. It's going forward and backwards. So the fact that they've been able to master those sorts of balance issues untethered, it's amazing. It's fantastic from like a wow, I can't believe they can do that standpoint, and I love it. And I think one of the reasons that like an international treaty wouldn't work with these, whereas it does kind of have effectiveness with biological weapons, is what's the practical application for biological weapons beyond murdering people in terrible, horrible ways? Not a lot. Whereas
Well, I
what's the
think the goal would be don't develop these robots and give them the ability to hurt people. Like they're obviously going to be helpful in many things, construction, taking care of people, taking care of animals, building, I don't know, all kinds of stuff.
yeah. And I think though that's the key difference, right? Because nobody's developing this core thing that, well, you can use it poorly as to create add a biological weapon component on top of it really easily by just handing the germs we've been developing a machine
Mm-hmm.
gun. You can't do that. You can do that with this. If you do friendly robots that can dance as backup dancers in a concert, it just takes a line of code to program that backup dancer, robot to crush a human skull. So like you're already developing these things for other purposes. So it's going to be really hard to say, well, you can't co-opt them, because there are going to be people who co-opt them. So I'm not sure like that regulations might be effective in this scenario, though I'm not opposed to it. And I think it might be good for people to say, hey, like you can't send these things to hurt humans. And that's, make this, a war crime to use robots in this way and to deploy robots in this way. I'm certainly for that. I just, it's not going to stop the problem, but hopefully it creates accountability for those who would use it for these purposes. And that's, to me, as I'm thinking about this, what problems does this solve? It doesn't solve any problems for me as a tax-paying citizen whose money is going to support the police and the military. It doesn't solve any problems for me. It solves problems for them. The problems it solves for them is resistance and accountability, right? Like you can't reason with a robot. You can't really reason with a police officer or a soldier anyway, but you can try. That's a human looking person that you can talk to, that has feelings, that can understand what I'm doing may or may not be wrong, that is hopefully, not always, but hopefully taught to question the morality of the orders they're getting. I have friends in the military, and they tell me they were taught that they're not allowed to follow unlawful orders, that's, you're supposed to disobey the chain of command. Obviously, that doesn't happen very often, and hopefully for good reasons. But you at least have a human brain saying, maybe I shouldn't be shooting those civilians. Those are unarmed people. I'm going to push back on that order. Whereas, hey, once it's about pushing a button, then the morality just comes down to what that person pushing the button thinks, is right. And once you program these things, there's no more reason there, and there's no accountability, right? Because now you can say, well, these dogs were programmed to act this way. Well, but who programmed them? Well, that's, we have a number of technicians and analysts working on this issue, and it's a way of saying, hey, we're going to do what we want, and you can't hold us accountable. And that's really what's terrifying, to me anyway, is that there are people who think that this is appropriate. This has been deployed on the streets of New York and Boston already. Like, how does that help? Who on these streets says, oh yeah, that makes me feel safer? Not a single damn person is looking at the robot dog and saying, that makes me feel safer. Everybody is saying, I don't want that determining my fate.
Well, this goes into something that our friend Teehee said on our live stream about the Patriot Act. What is safety? Safety is having your needs met. What needs are being met by the police having these cyber dogs to like general people? Nothing. It doesn't help anybody. Really, it does. It helps them directly.
And why not take them? How expensive are these robots? What's the maintenance costs? Like from a pragmatic standpoint, take that money and invest in, funds for increased training for officers. Take that money and invest it in education programs and mental health programs and public health programs so that we aren't sending, police officers to deal with issues that are mental health issues and addiction issues with violence in ways that they aren't trained to accurately understand and prevent. This is just such a knee-jerk reaction that we need a robot to shoot beanbags at people to solve problems. Like, no, we don't. Our problems are a little bit more complex than that. People need clean water. People need job opportunities. People need access to healthcare. Like, this doesn't solve those problems. This solves the problem of like, well, this is a bigger, better way to punch people in the face. And we've got a lot of ways to do that. And you look at everything that's been happening in the world, our entire lives, like we're punching too many people in the face. We're kneeling on too many necks. The issue isn't that we need to be more efficient at this, that we need to be crueler. This is the exact opposite problem we need to be solving for. We need more kindness, more empathy, more understanding, more infrastructure so that we don't get to the point where people think they need a robot dog to, crowd can control the crowd.
I think that's very well put.
Yeah. I think I saw a documentary on this. It was called RoboCop.
Terminator.
Ghost in the Shell. I mean, this is all coming. It's the minds that saw this coming 20, 30, 40 years ago and warned us about this and said, well, this is what's happening, and this is how these technologies are going to be employed to hurt us. And it looks a lot like reality now.
Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today. So thank you very much for joining me and having these super interesting, very cyberpunk conversations today. If you like the show, subscribe to the channel, like this video, click the bell for notifications. We are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. So check us out. We'll be back here on Friday at 1 o'clock next week. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks again, Dayton.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everybody.